Good evening from Mafeking, South Africa. We hope you're having a wonderful time so far, and we're so sorry we couldn't be with you tonight.
Hello everybody. I'd like to welcome you and also thank you so much for taking this time to be with us tonight in the African Orchard.
Tonight we want to take a look at a strategy we have to reach thousands of orphans and vulnerable children across Southern Africa. But in order to understand our future, it's necessary that we take a little look to our past. 20 years ago, when Mike and I moved to the city of Mafeking to pastor a church, we found out to our horror that there were children rummaging on the city garbage dump for food. Children as young as 3 and 4 scavenging for food by eating other people's garbage. This was not acceptable. We mobilized our church and we had a response, and pretty soon we were feeding 30 to 40 children at the garbage dump every day. Although this was a compassionate response, it wasn't a very smart response, because very soon more and more children were coming to the garbage dump for food. And as you well know, a garbage dump is not a place to be feeding children. We did a quick survey and we discovered that most of the children were coming from a village called Top Village. And so we moved this feeding project into Top Village. And that's when the enormity of the problem hit us. The adult population was dying of AIDS, leaving these children orphaned and completely and totally vulnerable. No wonder they were scavenging for food at the garbage dump. We formulated a plan, and firstly we started caring for this adult population that were dying by providing home-based care for these sick patients. We then also formulated responses to care for these orphans and these vulnerable children. We also started a church in the village, and that church soon became the focal point of the village. This was where there was life. This is where there was hope. Pretty soon, one village became 2 villages, and 3 villages, and 4. And over the next few years, we would like this to become 50 villages. 50 villages where the church is caring for the orphans and the vulnerable children amongst us. I have been immensely blessed to be a part of this movement called Helping Hands in Africa. I have been so privileged that God would use me and work in me and through me to help and to make some kind of a difference in the city where I live. But I will always keep in mind and always remember the faces of these young children that are so vulnerable and struggling nearly to survive.
You are Lord and God, the creator of all things. For the whole earth is filled with your glory.
Michelle mentioned the word survival. So let's talk a little bit about what survival looks like for so many children in Africa. Most of us grow up in society where there's 3 generations: children, parents, and grandparents. In normal society, each of those generations need each other. Each of those generations benefit from one another. But obviously for the children, it's the parents that are the most important generation. It's the parents that provide the love, the care, the support, the nurture, the affirmation that children need. The parents are also the income earners who provide support for their family and for their children. Over the years, as I've worked alongside pastors in rural communities and villages in Africa, I've noticed a phenomenon developing which I call the missing generation. HIV prevalence and AIDS deaths in Africa is the highest in the 25 to 49-year-old age group. Because this parent generation is missing, we now have a gap that is leaving 2 generations, the elderly and the children, absolutely vulnerable and struggling for survival. In the midst of this incredible tragedy, there's an incredible opportunity for the church to step in and fill the gap that's been created by the generation that's gone missing. Who better than the local church to rise up and step into that gap and become an extended family to those children who have been left so vulnerable and struggling so seriously to survive. The gap will be filled. If it's not filled by the pastor of the local church or the church community itself, it could be a gang leader. It could be a drug lord. For some of the young girls growing up, it could become a pimp. It could even be some other religion. I believe it should be the church that fills that gap. I believe the church is the hope for these vulnerable children. But in this crisis situation and in this moment of opportunity, the church in Africa is a church that needs help. As we read the New Testament, we see a number of examples of where churches who were in need were supported and assisted by churches who had enough, churches who had an abundance. I believe that we can follow this example in our generation. I believe that where the church in Africa is a church in need, there is something that we can do. We believe that the village pastor and the local church is the hope of survival for the children of Africa. I would like to invite you in this time of crisis to use this moment of opportunity to especially do good to the household of faith in Africa. Many of who are struggling on a daily basis for survival.
We give you